Official welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Kalina. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager here at Relay 42, and I'll be your host at today's webinar. So today, we're going to do a deep dive into acquiring customers in Cookieless world. Or in other words, we're going to talk about how we, marketers, digital experts, can continue to be relevant and to reach prospects when third-party cookies are no longer available. And for some of you here today, I see some familiar faces. You probably recall that a few months ago, we had a similar session on this topic. And what happened afterwards was that we received a huge number of questions and requests to do a follow-up session and to do a deep dive into the topic. That's why I'm super excited that we were able to pull it off in a very short notice. And I'm really excited to welcome today's speakers, our subject matter experts, Richard and David. Richard, many of you know he's the Customer Success Manager and Strategy Consultant here at Relay, and also internally known as the Cookieless World Expert. And David, our UK Solution Consultant Lead and a Google FLEDGE Expert. Welcome, Richard, and welcome, David, to today's session. Really happy to have you here.
Thanks, Kalina.
Thanks.
Thank you. So before we dive in, just a few house rules. So today we are in Demio. This is our webinar platform, and it's a live webinar. You're going to see the presentation and the speakers live the whole time in your screen. And on the right-hand side is the chat. The chat is private. We really value privacy, but it's an active chat. So feel free to ask your questions in the chat. We're going to see them and we're going to answer them in the end. So that's it. Quite short and simple. Thanks, everyone. And I would like to welcome Richard to the stage to open today's session. Richard, take it away.
Yes, thank you, Kalina. Thanks for the intro. So, as mentioned by Kalina, today's topic is all about the cookieless world and especially a focus on acquiring customers in a cookieless world. So what we see is there's a lot happening in the market, whether it's GDPR, ITP policies, browser initiatives. Everything has to do something with consumers that want to be back in control of their data. And the thing is, this is something that's going on for quite some time. So it's something that hasn't been new. It's actually something that's going on for years already. And even though Google postponed to 2024 the phase out of third-party cookies, the cookies are already crumbling. So what we see is that over the past years, Safari already launched in 2017 their ITP program, and they have been making updates ever since. So it's not something new. And what is funny to see is that a lot of people are focusing actually on just the depreciation of third-party cookies. While in fact, when you look closer to, for instance, Safari, it's not just blocking third-party cookies, but there's the second thing going on, which is limiting first-party JavaScript set cookies. So it basically means that these cookies, apart from the blocking of third-party cookies, are being limited in time. So first-party JavaScript set cookies are either limited to a 1-day time frame or a 7-day time frame, based on the type of cookie or what the content of that cookie is. And what's even funnier is that Google silently did the exact same, even though their time period is now set to 1 year. But in October, actually, Google Chrome launched an initiative where they also limited the time of these first-party cookies, which is not on the internet, which is not to be talked about, but what actually happened on the background. And as a matter of fact, Safari is with their leading initiative in this factor. They're actually a big party. So even though everyone is focusing on whatever Google is doing and the delay of Google and everything that happens on Google's side, Safari is actually a big player in the market. So currently holding 20% of the global market share in browsers. And when you look at mobile, it's even 30%. You can conclude that the impact of the cookieless world is already here today, and it's quite huge already. You can say that almost 1/4 of your visitors is already impacted by the cookieless world, and we still only focus on Google and when Google will actually drop the third-party cookie. So it's good to be also aware before we dive into that third-party cookie and what that means, to also be aware of what happens on first-party cookies and acquisition, because actually, especially on acquisition, first-party cookies and the limits that are set to these cookies, they have a major impact as well. And that impact on your marketing strategies, we often see it on the market as called the Dory effect. And for those that don't know Dory, Dory is a fish of the movie Finding Nemo that has short-term memory loss. So basically, she doesn't know what happens a few seconds before. And that's basically what happens also with the fact that first-party cookies are deleted, because these cookies that are oftentimes used to recognize a user. So if those cookies are deleted after 7 days, that basically means you're no longer able to recognize the same user coming back to your website after day 8, day 9, day 10, or whenever they come back to your website. And this means that this has an impact on your marketing strategies as well. So without talking about how to get people to your website, this has a major impact on whatever happens on your website. And you can think of things like on-site personalization. So people that sell products that don't go over 1 day. So imagine a car or a mortgage. People don't buy a car in just one session. People don't close a mortgage in just one session. So they repeatedly visit your website. And this is something that on-site personalization is focusing a lot on, because by stitching those sessions together, you are able to personalize the experience based on this historic behavior. But if the cookie, so that one thing that identifies that user, is no longer available, it means that you can be less relevant whenever that user comes back to your website. And that actually limits your possibilities on on-site personalization to acquire new customers and to deliver them the content that's actually relevant to them. The second impact, and that's actually maybe even a bigger impact, is on your experiments. Most experiment tools leverage these same first-party cookies. So that means that today I visit the website and I fall into bucket A, so variant A of an experiment. 8 days later, I come to the website again, so I revisit the website, and it could be that in that case, the cookie is gone and I will be put in variant B, which isn't necessarily an issue until you look at the statistics. So let's say I would convert in that second session. That conversion will then be drawn back to variant B, but is that actually a valid conclusion? Because maybe variant A lead me to actually coming back to the website to convert in that second session. And this all has some impact based on those first-party cookies. So we already talked about analysis of experiments, and that's actually the third one. So apart from experiments, most of the analytics tools around the market, they use the same first-party identifiers or first-party cookies that are currently limited by Safari. So that means that in your analytics tools, there might be people being recognized as new users while they're actually returning users, but the cookie has been expired. So as long as you don't have a solid identifier, these are some major limitations. But the good thing is, as we talk a bit more about replacement of third-party cookie, which is still kind of vague, there is actually solutions to overcome this issue on first-party identifiers or first-party cookies, and that is generating your own identifier. So no longer be reliant on the identifiers that have been set by JavaScript by one of your suppliers, but generate your own identifier, set it from your server, and those cookies will not be impacted by time. So that means that you can still build up one profile based on that identifier and actually stitch together using identity management the identifiers from all those other tools that do refresh in 1 day or 7 days after they added the cookie. So there is actually a way to get back in control of this issue already in place now, and it's something you should definitely look into. So that's something we wanted to start off this meeting with, because it is something that's oftentimes overlooked, and I wanted to highlight the importance of this fact, because this can majorly impact whatever you're doing. It can impact your attribution models, it can impact your experiments, your personalization, anything. So it's an important factor to at least be aware of. And on that note, diving right into the details of what we're actually here for. Third-party cookies and acquisition. So as Kalina mentioned, we already gave a session earlier where we explained the impact on the main strategies. And for those that were not there, the main strategies that we see for acquisition are basically the retargeting of website visitors. So people that have been on your website, retarget those users, try to get them back to your website to actually make them convert on your product. That's one of the main strategies. Second strategy that we covered and we will be covering now again is the third-party audience buying. So buying audiences or buying traffic to your website via DSPs, RTB platforms, etc. And the third one is lookalike audiences. So leveraging your own data to find similar people around the globe via your advertising platform. So providing them data that they can build similar profiles for that you can target to acquire them as new customers. Well, these three strategies, we want to dive deeper into some cookieless alternatives. So how do you handle retargeting if third-party cookies are no longer available? Well, the first one is pretty simple, and it's actually something you should have started already a few years ago, and that is building a solid first-party identifier strategy. So collecting first-party identifiers of prospects, trying to get them, get their email address, get their phone number, to actually target them based on those identifiers. But the truth is, not everyone will feel comfortable leaving their personal identifiers in an early stage. So for that, you will need an alternative to third-party cookies. And alternatives are there on the market being tested. One of them is, for instance, ID graphs. So an ID graph basically allows you to share with them any identifier that you have available, and they'll try to stitch it together to identifiers that they have of a specific user that you can then potentially use to retarget them. Again, these are things that are already around there, but are yet to be validated or tested. What happens if third-party cookies are no longer there? And the third one, which is in experimental phase, which David will do a deep dive in a few minutes, is Google FLEDGE. So an actual alternative to third-party cookies, and it's an in-browser alternative that David will cover in the next few minutes. The second strategy, so third-party audience buying, and well, the main message here is it will completely change to what we're used to. There's no way to replace third-party cookies in a way that we know them now. So that means you need to go either back to something that we did already for quite some years, and that is contextual targeting. So basically targeting based on the context of a website that actually is offering banner space. And that's something that's around there for years already. We all know it from the past, and it's been pushed back a little bit in the last few years, but it's now taking a more prominent decision.
It's almost like bringing back some old strategies, right?
Yeah.
They used to be perceived as an old-fashioned way of doing digital marketing, but now they're gonna come handy again.
Indeed, we're going back in time on this factor, but yeah. The good thing is also here Google is trying to figure out alternatives to it, but this one is also very much in testing stage, and yeah, we don't know yet where they will go. But the important thing on third-party audience buying is that it will change. This is the strategy that will change the most, I would say, from all the strategies that we are highlighting today. And the third one is, yeah, that's actually already changing a lot over the past year. So what you see already is the parties of Google, the parties of Facebook, they already opened up lookalike audiences based on your CRM data. So, and at the beginning of lookalike audiences, they based it on whatever data they collected via their pixel. While over the past few years, they already opened up to also share your customer data and push your customer data in there, so they could build customer or lookalike audiences based on data that you own, so your first-party data. And this is actually something that you can do. So once someone is a customer, or when someone has left behind their email address or any other identifier, you could share it with those partners to build lookalike audiences. However, the collection of data, so building a lookalike audience based on behavior on your website, that is about to change. So what you already see, and you might be familiar with, for instance, Facebook pushing you towards their conversion API, is that they they want you to move to a server-side connection with them. So no longer sharing information, no longer sharing information with Facebook via Pixel, but sharing information with Facebook via server-to-server connection. And this is something that is evolving, and other parties are implementing these kind of APIs as well, so that no longer external JavaScript needs to be loaded to actually track behavior on your own website. So these are the main strategies that we also covered in the last session that we want to briefly stand still with. And we have a fourth one that we want to share with you as well, and that's the data partnership. So basically the power that we see also in data partnerships. Because data partnerships are basically sharing first-party identifiers with a partner that you trust and a partner that is relevant to your customers as well. So think of it as a car dealer having a partnership with a supplier of car loans. Someone that is in market for a car loan is most likely also in market for a car, and the other way around. So by partnering up with someone that is actually mutually beneficial to each other, you can share each other's data and focus on relevant customers and try to increase the relevance and not be reliant on third-party data to do that. And the good thing about those partnerships is that they're based on a strategic basis. So there is a strategic basis that led to that partnership, and a strategic basis that actually allows you to discuss how you will share data, when you will share data. And that means that all the underlying agreements also make this kind of partnership more secure than in any other data partnership around there. So building data partnerships with relevant partners is definitely a strategy we would advise you, if you're not already doing it, to add to your marketing strategies, because this is a way to still get to people that don't know you yet, or that are not in market with you yet, but that are actually relevant to you. And on that note, I would like to hand it over to David. Kalina?
Yeah, maybe one thing to mention on your last point. We're not going to deep dive into this, but we have a few very interesting case studies on data partnerships. So if anybody's interested, we can also send them around after the sessions, just to also give you inspiration about the type of partnerships that you can think about. Sometimes, this can be the starting point, can be the most challenging one.
Yeah, and I think to add on that, I think it counts for all the strategies, and also like the first party data limits that you're facing. We have best practices. I think there's a business case on our website even on how we overcome this issue with one of our airlines. So that's one thing that we will cover.
Nice. Thank you, Richard.
David, take it away.
Well, thank you for that, Richard. So welcome and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to be talking more specifically around what Google is doing around FLEDGE. And I guess before I go into that, probably a confession. The word expert, I'm not sure whether I can actually lay claim to that title just yet, because I think this is such a new area for a lot of people. However, I've been following it for a good part of 18 months since the early part of 2020, when basically Google announced the Web Incubator Group for FLEDGE, where a number of industry veterans are able to participate in this collaboration. And I have to say that having spent 18 months on it, there is still a lot to digest and to unravel and to learn, because I think there are still parts of the specification that is still being fine-tuned. Some parts are pretty secure in terms of what they intend to do. But I would say in terms of having a framework that essentially replaces third-party programmatic retargeting, I think we're still probably some months away before that will be launched. So luckily, we've got basically a year or so to be prepared for this. So that's the scene. And what I like to do is just kind of frame it a little bit more with a couple of slides here. When we look at FLEDGE, FLEDGE is really for first-party retargeting. for programmatic use cases. And there are going to be a whole variety of different ways to target your website visitors, the people that are potentially your future buyers or future customers. And amongst that, we also have to explore other IDs as well, because while FLEDGE is one solution, I don't think it's the only solution in the marketplace, and there are others that we should also be considering as well. Then there are the third parties. So a lot of our advertisers will have worked with third party, particularly with the traditional DMPs. And traditional DMPs were effectively marketplaces where you can buy basically third party data. However, with GDPR, as Richard commented earlier, many of those DMPs will struggle to provide the data, or what are called consented data, that you can actually use for third-party retargeting. Now, we also need to start also looking at, I would say, second-party data, and this is where you may have heard of things like clean rooms, and there are a number of providers that offer clean room capabilities, and Relay will be exploring those throughout 2023 as well. Now, if I look at the global market share, particularly from a browser perspective, by far Chrome is the giant in the room, occupying around about 67% of the share of the market as of 2020. And this is coming from basically global stats or stat counter. And then in second place, you have Safari, around about 20%. And this is basically across all devices. If we look at mobile specifically, Safari climbs a bit higher, but not at the detriment of Chrome. Chrome still command around about 65 to 67% of the market share, even with mobile devices. And then this slide is intended to show the kind of quality of first-party identifiers and what it means in terms of quantity. So we know that there is a ton of third-party cookies, and this is the way that the ad industry particularly worked on. And however, the quality of those third-party cookies are debatable. So it's and the question is how many of those third-party cookies are actually addressable? And as Richard mentioned earlier, there are lifetime expectancies around third-party cookies, and with the retirement of third-party cookies in Safari, obviously that is no longer an option, particularly on those browsers. Then there are ad platforms with their own identifiers. Some are, I would say, better than others. And again, the question still arises, how many of those identifiers are actually addressable? Then there are first party, which is people that arrive on your website. So a lot of those people that arrive on your website, you want to maximize those particular visitors, because those are generally the most likely visitors that will go on to buy something. So if they don't appear on your website, the chances of them buying something is going to be pretty remote, unless there are other point of sales. And then there are the partner identifiers, and there is a mix of different types of partner identifiers. However, the synchronization of those identifiers have to happen in the background and not necessarily from the client side. So in terms of first party identifiers, the ones that are particularly persistent and sticky, and the ones that there is some kind of longevity around those identifiers are emails, phone, and the mobile advertiser IDs, whereas your IDFA or AAID. So those are the identifiers that we will price the most, because that's when you get into one-to-one marketing. So I'm going to go into FLEDGE a little bit more, and there is a lot of acronyms when it comes to Google, and so I wouldn't bore you a lot of those acronyms. And what I'll try to do is try to explain it in an ordinary way with FLEDGE, because I do think we can get lost in the technicalities sometimes. So FLEDGE itself is an acronym, and it really is the first experiment around programmatic retargeting when third-party cookies disappear. Now, for a lot of advertisers where, let's say, a large chunk of their media spend is focused on programmatic, then you can imagine that this is actually quite a key part of the marketing mix, and one which cannot necessarily be ignored or cannot be compensated by shifting that spend to other ad platforms. And when we look at FLEDGE, there are the key functions around programmatic retargeting, which is targeting, which is the audience, the bidding, the messaging, and reporting. Those functions exist in the current programmatic framework that needs to be translated into FLEDGE, and FLEDGE needs to be able to accommodate those various functions. And they have come up with the various design elements that ties to those particular functions around programmatic. So for example, when we look at targeting, FLEDGE talks about interest groups and how the browser essentially records and maintains those interest groups, which is analogous to an audience or a segment that the advertiser would want to be able to retarget. The bidding, this is where I think the biggest change in the framework, and that is that all the bidding happens on the device. So that's unlike it is at the moment where it's off device, all the bidding happens within the browsers. There's a lot of work that the browser needs to be able to do here and perform. Messaging, one thing that stood out for me is that it's a new term, which is called what's called fence frames. And essentially what happens is that the creative itself is essentially wrapped around a wall where no data can possibly be leaked out from it. And so that's what Google calls a fence frame. So it's a very draconian way of rendering an ad on a third party or publisher website. Then there is reporting. And how this is going to be done currently is on an event level. So that means that you can actually see the winning bid per browser and also what ad was rendered. However, going forward, it is likely that this will be replaced by another web incubator project from Google, which is called attribution reporting or aggregate reporting. And that is something that is still in the works. And so I would just imagine that this will be refined as we go along. But for the time being, we can actually report on the event level, but going forward, that may not be possible. So if I look at FLEDGE and look at it from the buyers and the sellers point of view and the web visitor. So the web visitor would visit a variety of different advertiser websites, and for every advertiser website that person visits, the advertiser may create an interest group. The advertiser could actually own that interest group and manage it themselves, or the advertiser can delegate the permission to a third party. That third party could be an ad tech platform, like for example, Relay42. That could also be a DSP, which is typically the traditional way of buying ad space through a DSP partner. And when that visitor then visits a publisher website, they will join a number of interest groups. What happens then is that the advertiser will see all those interest groups that are on the browser and initiates an auction. The seller will basically score every single interest group along with the ads that those interest groups present, and they will declare the winner based on those interest groups. That is really, in a nutshell, what happens within FLEDGE. And there are numerous demonstrations that one can view here as well. And Relay 42 also have a demonstration around this if anyone is interested. So this is really how it works without going into too much of the actual technicalities, because within each one of those elements, design elements like interest groups, in-browser auction, messaging, and also reporting, there are just a ton of things to get your head around. And right now, I think there is safe to say that no one has the full picture in terms of what FLEDGE ultimately looks like in the end. However, from Relay's point of view, we are actually looking at it from the advertiser's point of view, from our clients. And so what that means is that we're looking at what are the opportunities that FLEDGE presents and what are the threats as well that FLEDGE presents, and whether there is, early mover advantage for adopting FLEDGE for some advertisers. And we are actually actively trialing FLEDGE with a couple of clients of ours. One notable client is a very large e-commerce company, because they have such a rich data set, and also it kind of lends itself to this kind of experimentation as well.
So then we're gonna have paid advertising only based on first-party cookies and no third-party involved.
No. And
wow.
It's safe to say that FLEDGE, it's quite a dramatic departure from what we are used to, in the sense that it's completely cookie-free. There are no identifiers being sent around at all. What I would like to explain in this slide is really the way that the auction works, and also introducing another component, which is what is called a trusted server in this case, because this particular component is actually quite key to how FLEDGE would work in a very dynamic and very fluid environment where there are millions and millions of users and basically hundreds and thousands of buyers and sellers. So on the one hand, as I explained before, you have the buyer, and then on the other side, you have the server. And in the browser cell, you have what is called a worklet. A worklet is essentially a piece of code that does a lot of the work, all the heavy lifting. So what tends to happen is that if a user is on a publisher website, the publisher, whether they themselves or they may even delegate that to an SSP, they will initiate the auction, and they will select a number of buyers that can participate in this auction, because they do have the right to say, these are the buyers that we would like to sell to. Likewise, the buyers will be able to choose whether they want to participate. So there's a handshake that happens initially where the seller selects a number of buyers, and the buyers will basically declare that they want to participate in the auction. Then the buyer will fetch the real-time data, and this is where they will fetch the real-time data from the trusted server. For example, you actually might want to adjust your bid. You may also want to adjust your ad. Instead of showing this particular creative, you want to make sure that there is an alternative creative because it's more recent to what they're interested in, for example. So there needs to be a mechanism for FLEDGE to be able to accept data or metadata dynamically to adjust the bidding criteria. And then the seller will also fetch real-time information from the trusted server, maybe because what they've said is that I may no longer want to be able to render this type of ad, or basically they would say that these number of buyers are now what we want to sell to, because originally we may want to sell to any buyer, but now we want to basically be a lot more selective, purely because there's a lot more demand for my ad space. And so the seller has the option of fetching that real-time data. Then the buyer will generate the bid. And so there will be a number of different buyers that will basically generate the bid, and the seller will process each bid and what's called scoring the ad. and each ad will have essentially a desirability score, and the highest desirability score will win. Now, this is a slight departure from some programmatic auction currently, because some are based on second price, some are basically direct buys, so therefore there is no real contest around that. So there is a slight departure in terms of the way that basically the auction rules are applied within FLEDGE. And like I said, the trusted server is actually a key component in all of this, purely because there needs to be some information that has to be adjusted dynamically so that both the buyer and the seller are prepared to pay for a particular ad, and the seller is prepared to show a particular ad on their web property. So this is really FLEDGE in a nutshell. I mean, there's a ton more detail that we can actually go into and explore. Like I said, we are trialing this for a couple of advertisers, and I have to say so far the observations are quite mixed in terms of how this works. And certainly one of those observations is that it definitely needs to be a lot simpler for the industry to adopt it.
Yeah, this looks like a lot. Also, the whole principle is completely new, and it's great for all the consumers. And but yeah, it looks like a lot and a lot of changes, so that everybody needs to get used to and kind of relearn programmatic almost.
Yeah, complete departure from what you are accustomed to, and I think it does take a bit of getting used to. I mean, it's worth. I think I did mention that there are opportunities for advertisers here, and there is an opportunity for advertisers to be in far more control over their bidding strategy, whereas before they tend to depend, or I would say rely on the DSPs to do that. Going forward, I think it could be mixed, because I've already seen quite a few large advertisers, particularly those that spend a phenomenal amount on programmatic, have already invested a lot of their time working out how they can actually provide the bidding function themselves. But again, it's not for everyone. It depends on your appetite for getting into the weeds of this. And there may be certain advantages for doing so for advertisers, because if it leads to better performance, then then this could be an option.
Definitely. Well, thanks, David, for sharing the behind the scenes and the most recent developments around Google FLEDGE. It's a highly anticipated project, of course, and yeah, let's keep on following the developments. And of course, the new project that you just mentioned with a customer will be very exciting to really see the results. We are now moving towards the last part of today's webinar, and it's a discussion. As we mentioned, we received quite a lot of questions already from customers, partners, basically everybody almost that we talked to on the topic asked some questions. And to kick off today's discussion, we have selected a few of the most popular questions, and then immediately afterwards, we're going to address the few questions we received in the chat. So starting with the first question, I'm going to read it out loud and we can kick off the discussion. So first one, a customer or a prospect comes to the website but does not leave personally identifiable information. How can CDPs help target this group? David, I think this really falls into Google FLEDGE. Would you like to tackle this one?
Yeah, I think the short answer is because we do not, FLEDGE doesn't require an identifier in order to retarget that person. And therefore, within Chrome, you can definitely do this. And it's probably worth adding that you can also do this in Edge as well, because both Chrome and Edge are collaborating on the same incubation project.
Yeah, oh, that's at least handy and to cover those two ones. All right, second also popular question, it's around Facebook. So the question is, can the likes of Facebook still use a first-party cookie on my domain for matching a profile?
Shall I jump in on it?
Richard?
Yeah, I can give it a go. It's indeed, I think it's a good question. And But the question is a bit broader. So yes, they can still add a first-party cookie. Whether or not they are able to match it to a profile, that's a question you should actually ask Facebook, because we don't know how the actual matching happens on Facebook's side. But the fact that they are moving or pushing their customers actually to use the conversion API rather than the pixel means that they are moving themselves away as well from that first-party cookie and actually using their pixel to target profile. So yeah, we can't completely answer this question because the question is basically needs to be asked to Facebook. But yes, they can still add that first-party cookie as they do today, and they will still be able to do that because they don't add it as a third-party cookie, but as a first-party cookie, which is limited in time, but is not blocked by any browser as of this moment or in the future.
Yeah, good to know. In some countries, as we know, in some countries like Thailand, for example, Facebook is bigger channel than even the own website, right? So it's a huge huge communication channel. And last question of this the group that we received was about ID graphs. So the question to both of you: do you see ID graphs as potential solutions for targeting in a cookieless world?
I think it's a hard question for now, because I think a lot of ID graphs are also figuring out, because ID graphs contain any identifier, right? So they contain both third-party cookies as identifiers, as well as email hashes, as well as any other identifier they can collect. So the main question is, are they still able to connect these profiles if the third-party cookies disappear, or do they really require an email hash? And if you already have an email hash, then yeah, what is the added benefit of an ID graph? That is for them to actually prove. And David, please jump in if you have an addition to that. But I think that's, yeah, they have to prove themselves.
Yeah, and probably as we see, they change all the time, right? So I think it really depends from one solution to the other. We know some that also left Europe, for example, and some new ones pop up. So maybe it's also a case-by-case basis in the end. Right. Well, thank you for that. We have a few questions, and I want to welcome everyone in the remaining minutes to add their questions to the chat. I'm going to start with the first one, which we received earlier in the presentation. It's about lookalike. So Mihai asks, own AI model for lookalikes. Can you explain? So I think it was part of, Richard, of your presentation on one of the strategies.
Yeah, it's actually, it's part of the previous slides we did, and I forgot to delete that block because of time reasons, but I can explain what we discussed indeed during the last session. So what we see with the evolvement of advertising and the deletion of third-party cookies and everything that's going on is that advertising itself is becoming more pricey. So the cost per click, the cost per view, they are increasing year by year. So what we would advise you to do is spend your money wisely. And actually, one of the projects that David is also working on with one of our clients is actually use your own AI models to basically build lookalike models on your website. And those lookalike models can be as easy as trying to predict whether or not someone will likely be converting, yes or no. And based on the score of that AI model, you can actually already decide whether or not you want to retarget that user at all. So in the past, it was very much rule-based. Any visitor on the website that visits specific pages, you would decide to retarget yes or no with the same budget, maybe increase the budget if they visited specific pages. But by including an AI model into the mix, you can actually predict whether or not someone is likely to convert and decide whether or not you want to bid higher, lower, maybe even exclude them from your targeting. And in that way, actually save money by already pulling those AI models forward rather than relying on the lookalike audiences that Facebook and Google and the likes are offering you.
Right, and then target maybe the more high-value customers. Or
yeah, or the medium, basically. So the high ones, you could argue whether or not they would convert without retargeting them. And the mediums one, they need maybe that extra push, so you might want to increase your bids. While the lower ones, yeah, chances that they will convert are very low, so you might want to lower your budget. And these kind of decisions you can make based on models that you're running on your website.
Right. Yeah, we're getting smarter and smarter, but also ads are getting more and more expensive. So this is really funny. Second question, Richard, I think it was also on your presentation, on your part of the presentation, and it's about data partnerships. The question is, how would the data partnership work from a practical perspective? For example, GDPR. I would assume they would actually be sending personal identifiable information back and forth. Could you elaborate?
Yes, good question. Because indeed, because it's a partnership, it means that you need to have everything on paper. So what data to transfer, yes and no. And that is one part of the question. So making sure that you have everything agreed between those partners. But in order to share, you need PII of a specific user. You also need the approval of that actual user. So as soon as you start these kind of partnerships with any partner, you'll need to cover that in via an active opt-in on the user as well. So what you see at a lot of kinds websites actually already happening is there's a simple checkbox telling that we will share your data with partners, or we will use your data to provide you with relevant offers of our partners. And actually getting that active opt-in is a requirement, of course, before you can share any data with anyone else. So yeah, good question. You need to cover it. So yeah, definitely wouldn't push for sharing any identifier of all your customers, but only those that actually gave approval to it.
Yeah. Thanks, Richard. David, the rest of the questions are for you, I think. Charlotte asks, will the changes in the programmatic, I guess, reduce the reliance on Facebook and other social media channels as primary media channels?
I guess in truth, probably not, because Facebook and other social platforms are still the destination of choice for certain audiences. And, and it's about coverage. While programmatic offers a certain degree of coverage with publishers and other types of inventory like that, there is just still a load of people that would gravitate to those social media platforms. So I would say probably not so much. If anything, I think it's going to be, you're going to be more considered around your campaigns going forward. And also FLEDGE will give you at least another option and another flavor of retargeting that otherwise wouldn't exist when third-party cookies disappear. So yeah. Hopefully that answers your question there, Charlotte.
Yeah, and if not, of course, Charlotte, please also reach out to us after the session, and I can imagine there are more nuances that we can discuss. Jesse asks, in a post-FLEDGE world, might there be a business opportunity in curating high-quality, vertical-specific interest groups for consumption by other players in the advertiser-publisher ecosystem?
Yeah, I love this question. I think, yeah, absolutely. So you may, we talk about second party, because the FLEDGE has the option to delegate to other potential buyers and partners. It is quite foreseeable that, you can actually share interest groups between advertisers. And I will see that as a definitely advantage in the right direction for advertisers. And that would give you far more scale, and it would definitely give you far more people to target.
Yeah, we have a few minutes left, so I think we can try to answer two last questions, and then I would invite everyone to get in touch with you guys personally. Erwin asks, how beneficial is it, looking at the status of where FLEDGE is at the moment, to build a POC on it right now?
I think there is definitely a benefit to trying to get your head around it sooner than later. It is a mammoth task to try to basically catch up when it is in production. And I think a lot of advertisers, personally speaking, will basically it will be very chaotic for this way. And like we say with all our clients, I think it is actually be in your interest to be prepared for this. because the last thing you want is any disruption to your basically top and bottom line. Because certainly one of the advertisers that we're working with do not want to see a drop in revenue when this happens. So I think it is crucial to explore it as soon as possible.
At least dipping your toes, right, in how the system works can prepare you for when it's officially launched.
Yeah, I mean, if everything goes smooth, then I guess it's one less thing to worry about. But when there's a new framework and it's a complete restructure of how programmatic works, I cannot see it going smooth. So it is, there are perils, I think. So best to get your head around those as quickly as possible.
Gotcha. Last question, Jack asks, what will Google's monetization model be for FLEDGE?
Not so much, that's actually quite interesting because like for some DSPs now, and what we have seen with Amazon, it seems like they are moving in the direction of placing a CPM against the audience, which is analogous to an interest group here. So in the past, I mean, currently as we speak, you really bid on line item, insertion order, you put a CPM on that. But because you put a CPM on an audience, that's actually quite interesting. So how this would be monetized, I'm not really quite sure yet for Google under FLEDGE. However, they will see a lot of revenue from topics.
Right. And on this note, I think we can close at least today's discussion. And I think it's fair enough to say that there will be more. And we're already thinking of the next topics. We've opened a little poll to ask you guys on which element of FLEDGE you find the most interesting on a short term. And we're going to work on a follow-up session in the beginning of next year. So feel free to share your ideas, and we're going to prepare it for the next time. And on this note, before you go, quick giveaway from us. Together with the recording of the webinar, we're going to share our latest ebook with insights and strategies on how to prepare for a cookieless world. So be on the watch out for this one. It's going to be in your email in the coming days. And with this, I would like to close the session. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, David. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Also, the ones staying to the very end of today's webinar. Thank you again. Please feel free to reach out to us, to Richard, David, to me, or just a general email. And I wish you a very nice afternoon, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Take care.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.